are deep into the school year, almost being over already. We've started second semester. We have a brand new form of public speaking school that we started in December, and now we're a little bit used to it. Now we're a little bit more comfortable, and it's very, very exciting. Before we get started, I'm going to introduce our student speakers for today, and I'm going to go over what parts they have. You can bring the camera a little bit closer, not have such a far view. So for today, we have giving our public talk entitled, "Can Mankind Rule Themselves?" by Miss Mara Garcia. And then we will have our return visit part. It'll be done, well, our conductor will be Miss Sydney Grant, and the householder or the assistant will be Miss Gada Travolsi. And last but certainly not least, we will cover our Watch History article. I will conduct, but my reader will be Mr. Ellis Andrews. Okay, so before we get started, we have someone who's very special who's here to see their baby. Let's put the camera on Papa Grant and give him a big round of applause. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to invite up our first student speaker, Miss Mara Garcia, and once again, her theme will be, "Can Mankind Rule Themselves?"
Okay, so my topic is, can mankind rule themselves? Well, I am going to talk about that right now. So let's get started. Can everyone please get a social studies book and turn to page 391? On the topic about communism spreads. While you guys are getting there, I shall read what. After World War II, Americans were worried about the Soviet Union and spread of communism. The Soviet Union brought communism to large parts of Europe. The United States leaders feared that the Soviets wanted to spread communism to the entire world. Events in Asia made the Americans more concerned, so communism was spreading, and America was worried for the spread that it would take over them. In paragraph 3 on page 391, it says, there was another reason many people were worried about the spread of communism. In 1949, the Soviet Union built its own atomic bomb, like the Americans' atomic bomb. Like the Americans' atomic bombs, the Soviet bombs could destroy entire cities. The U.S. leaders did not want the Soviet military to be stronger than their own military. Scientists worked to develop bigger bombs and missiles called nuclear weapons. Okay. On the topic anti-communism in America, I shall read that. During the 1950s, fear of communism throughout the United States and led to anti-communism. Anti-communism was a movement to stop the spread of communism and communist ideas. Senator Joseph McCarthy was an anti-communist. He said the secret communists worked in the United States government. He claimed that they were spying for the Soviet Union. McCarthy made up most of these claims, but some were actually true. Okay. As you turn to the next page, it says the Korean War, and I shall read that. South Korea was a republic supported by the United States. North Korea had a communist government supported by the Soviet Union. In June of 1950, North Korean troops invaded South Korea. U.S. leaders thought the Soviet Union had helped plan the attack. So there are many different crews, like the Democrat and the Communism. It was crazy. the United States convinced that the United Nations to defend South Korea soldiers from 16 nations joined the fight, but the United States sent the most troops. American General Douglas MacArthur led the UN forces. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Communists also took power in Cuba. Cuba is an island nation 90 miles south of the United States. In 1959, Fidel Castro led a revolution in Cuba. The Soviet Union, led by Nikita Khrushchev, helped Castro set up a communist government in Cuba. In October 1962, the United States discovered that the Soviet Union was secretly putting powerful missiles in the United States. Worse, they were large enough to carry a nuclear bomb. President John F. Kennedy feared a surprise attack and ordered a blockade of Cuba. American warships surrounded the island. The ships prevented Soviet ships from getting in. Now here's the main question. Can mankind actually rule themselves? Well, from what I've seen in the text about communism and democracy, I think our government seriously needs some help with it, because we're having all these different nuclear wars, the Korean War, Cuban missiles, and I think we're having a lot of wars because of the disagreements, and it just hasn't gone so well for the government. So yes, that is my topic speech.
Okay, Mara, I'd really like to thank you for that public talk. It was very interesting. There was a lot of information that you covered from the book. And what some of you may not know is that the new outlines that are made from the public talks, they don't have that much reference material from the book. So for Mara to find that information, she had to do her own research, and she had to go within the book. Also, what I noticed, her dressing and grooming, she takes her assignments very seriously. She came looking like a professional, looking like someone who was ready to deliver an important speech. So I enjoyed that. Also, your poise, how you wore in terms of keeping composure, it really highlighted to me again, because you had your dress correctly and because of that poise, that calm manner, it allowed you to be very enthusiastic during your talk. And one thing that I want to highlight that I saw from your talk was your delivery and that enthusiasm. The book says, breathe life into your delivery. Speak with zeal, use natural gestures and sincere facial expressions to reflect your feelings. One key point I saw about her talk was that she turned her computer into a tablet. And in one hand she had her computer, and then in the other hand she was using for gestures and facial expressions so she could make that audience contact. When you have an assignment, especially a public talk or the return visit, it's okay to be close to your notes, but it'll make your talk that much more effective if you're able to look out into your audience as you're speaking with them. Because that not only keeps you engaged, but it keeps your audience engaged. So I really, really enjoyed that public talk. And it's a pretty tough question for a fifth grader to answer. Do you think mankind can rule themselves? In your opinion that you shared, I'll speak for probably the adults in the room. I think we would tend to agree with you that, we've tried a lot of governments, but it seems like mankind may need some help.
Yeah.
So I thank you. And now we're going to move on to our next student assignment, and that will be our return visit. And our return visit will be conducted by Miss Sydney Grant, and her assistant / householder will be Miss Gada Trabolsi, and they are going to discuss the Cuban Missile Crisis. So they'll be right here on the carpet, standing closer to the audience. Let's give them our attention, please.
Hey Sydney, can you describe the Cuban Missile Crisis and why the world is in danger?
Yes, I can.
And all the information you need is on page 392, paragraph 67, and to page 393, paragraph 6. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Communists also took power in Cuba. Cuba is an island nation 90 miles south from the United States. In 1959, Fidel Castro led a revolution in Cuba. The Soviet Union, led by Nikita Khrushchev, helped Castro set up a communist government in Cuba. In October 1962, the United States discovered that the Soviet Union was secretly putting powerful missiles in Cuba. These missiles could easily reach the United States. Worse, they were large enough to carry a nuclear bomb. President John F. Kennedy feared a surprise attack and ordered a blockade of Cuba. American warships surrounded the island. The ships prevented Soviet ships from getting in. The Soviets refused to take their missiles out of Cuba. For days, nuclear war seemed possible. Finally, Khrushchev decided to remove the missiles. In return, President Kennedy promised not to attack Cuba. This conflict is known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. After the crisis, leaders on both sides agreed to work together to prevent nuclear war.
Thank you. Can you also answer how did the Cold War end and why?
Oh, that's for next.
Okay.
Are we okay now? You can breathe. You can breathe. Sydney and Gata. I want to say that I really, really enjoyed that part. Genuinely. Because everything that I worked with you all on, and the way that I wanted that return visit part to be conducted, when I wrote it up, and when I decided that you all should start doing it in public speaking school, you all did it perfectly. Perfect. No flaws. And one thing, well, a couple things that I wanted to point out. I love how it seemed very natural. You guys came up here, and to me it didn't seem as if y'all were putting on some acting show like y'all were bad actors. It seemed very genuine. I've seen Gata come up to you before and ask you, oh, where do I find this? Or you go up to Gata and ask her something like that. Or both of y'all come to me. It was like it was a regular day in class. I also noticed what was really good was that you didn't just answer her question and just start talking. You said, well, Gata, you can find the answer here on page 392 and 393. And then you gave her the paragraphs where to find it. Not only did you give her the paragraphs, you read it to her. But here's something important that we have to remember whenever we have to do a return visit, or when we're just in class, because the whole point of the return visit is to show you all, the audience, how to find certain information. When you are showing someone something in the book, something important that Sydney did was that she showed the information to Gata in the book and let Gata read it along with her as she was reading it. So we really have to keep in mind that,
Can I take this?
yes, you can. And if I have anything else to finish up on there, just let me know.
Thank you.
One thing we've got to keep in mind when we're doing this part, people will not believe what you say. Okay, you can tell someone everything in the world, but if you don't have proof of it, if you don't show it to them from the book, there's no chance that you might be right. You could be, but it means so much more if you show it to them from their social studies book, because this is the foundation for our social studies class. So, I really enjoyed that whole part. And last but certainly not least, you took your time. You didn't come up here and rush. You took your time. It was very easy for me to understand, and I think it was very easy for the audience to understand. And I see Papa back there. That's a happy man. A happy man. So I'd like to thank you. And now it is time for the audience to get involved, because we are going to go over our Watch History article. Let's invite up our reader, Mr. Ellis Andrews, and let's give him a round of applause. Okay, so you all can go ahead and open up your articles. Brief moment to do that.
After World War II
Whoa, wait, hold on now. You can sit down. Don't be overzealous now. I gotta introduce him to everything. Okay. Okay, so we are going over our Watch History article. This is Social Studies Unit 4, Volume 1. Our topic is the Cold War. Please remember the directions. Your comments should come from information from the paragraph, your notes, internet sources, or your own personal experience. Please keep your comments 30 seconds or less. And we are going to now start and have our reader, Mr. Ellis Andrews. Mr. Andrews, can you please read paragraph 1 for us?
After World War II ended, the United States and the Soviet Union were the only major powers left in the world. The United States had become so technologically advanced with new weapons showcased during the war. The major weapon that caused panic around the world was Americans' atomic bomb. This weapon left the world feeling like the U.S. could demand anything of them, so a rush to get another atomic bomb was made by the Soviet Union. The Cold War had begun.
Paragraph 1. Thanks for your reading. How did technological advances in weapons lead to the Cold War? You can sit down, Alice. Mr. Petrick.
The United States was the first country to have access to a nuclear weapon and was for 10 years, but then the Soviet Union also had access, and the Soviet Union, the United States thought the Soviet Union could control the world. The U.S. did not want to be controlled by another country, so they threatened them with nuclear weapons. This act led to the Cold War along with many other acts.
I like it. Thank you. You can put the camera on people when they comment, don't you? Okay, further on this paragraph. Ms. Kendis.
It led to the Cold War because when the United States got their atomic bomb, it caused the Soviet Union to panic, which caused the Cold War.
Okay, and we'll take one more on this. Mr. Watt.
Technological advances led to the Cold War because the USA had an atomic bomb and threatened to drop it on countries that didn't do what the U.S. wanted them to do. And the Soviet Union did not want to be ordered around, so they made their own atomic bomb. It started the Cold War.
Thank you for all your comments. That's very well covered in paragraph 1. Let's have the reading of paragraph 2, please.
The United States and the Soviet Union had different ways of rulership. The U.S. had a capitalist economy with a democratic government where people voted for their leaders. The Soviet Union had a command economy with a communist government where the government controlled all aspects of life. Each country wanted to spread their form of government around the world. The U.S. felt that the spread of communism was so dangerous because the world could be ruled by the Soviet Union if most countries adapted communism as their form of government.
All right, thank you for your reading. Question for paragraph 2. Why did the U.S. feel the spread of communism was so dangerous? Yes, Miss Carter.
Because the U.S. had capitalism economy with the communist government, where people voted for the leaders. The Soviet Union and the USSR had combined economy with communist government, where the government controlled all aspects of life.
Okay, so we've got the different types of government. But why did the U.S. feel so dangerous for communism to spread? Mr. Hagee.
They felt that if communism would succeed, that the USSR would gain enough power to start World War III or take over the world.
Okay, all right, taking over the world, potentially starting another world war. Let's go to the back here and let's get Mr. Bauer.
The spread of communists was so dangerous because they thought the countries would fall under the control of a bad leader, which would start a war with the U.S. involved.
All right, let's get one more comment on this paragraph. Ms. Kennett.
They felt it was so dangerous because, like it says in the passage, the world could be ruled by the Soviet Union if most countries adapted to the communism as their form of government.
All right. Anything further that we haven't mentioned yet? I think we've got most of it covered. Okay, anything new? Go ahead, Ms. Garcia.
The U.S. felt that the spread of communism was so dangerous because if there was communism, there would be more dictators like Adolf Hitler. Dictators are people who have full control in a country. This would lead to communism. This is Tochi's answer.
Oh. Well, thank you, Tochi, for that comment. All right. Can we have the reading of paragraph 3, please?
In the 1950s, the USSR, or Soviet Union, developed their own nuclear bomb. Now, the US and USSR were involved in an arms race to see who could have the most nuclear weapons. The threat, though, was if one bomb was launched, all others would be launched, and that would be the end of the world. Obviously, the world has not ended, but there were some close calls. The most famous one is the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was a 13-day confrontation between the U.S. and the USSR, started by an American nuclear bomb, ready to be launched at the USSR from Italy and Turkey, and the Soviet nuclear bomb was ready to be launched to the U.S. from Cuba. This occurred because the U.S. tried to invade Cuba and failed, so the Cubans gave the Soviets permission to launch nukes at the U.S. from Cuba. If the U.S. ever tried to invade again, this worsened the relationship of the U.S. and the USSR.
Okay, so this is a big question here. Thank you for your reading. Let's take it one at a time. First, explain the significance of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Why was the Cuban Missile Crisis significant? Ms. Crowler.
Well, if one country were to be attacked by another country, that one country could easily destroy the world with the press of a button. So there was a lot of tension.
I like that point. If one bomb is shot, that means many others will be shot. That could bring the end of the world. Okay, let's go with Mr. Hartkin.
The significance was as she said, the bomb. If one bomb went off, more would too, and it also made Russia and the U.S. not trust each other.
Okay, so getting into our second question. Particular details about the Cuban Missile Crisis. Who wants to go into what the Cuban Missile Crisis was? Mr. Petrick.
The Cuban Missile Crisis was recalled when the United States tried to invade Cuba with a nuclear bomb and failed, and then Cuba gave the Soviet Union permission to launch a nuclear weapon at the United States.
Okay, so where were these bombs set up at? The U.S. had some, Soviet Union had some, Will touched on it, Soviet Union had some, ready to be launched from Cuba. What about the United States? Okay, let's go with our reader, Mr. Andrews.
It says in the text right here, American nuclear bomb ready to be launched at the USSR from Italy and Turkey.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I missed that comment, but it was very good. I heard you were talking about the U.S. having them ready from Turkey. All right, so now let's go on into our second question. We discussed this whole event, the Cuban Missile Crisis. We've talked about it in our public talk, talked about it in our return visit, talked about it in this article. What did this do to the relationship between the U.S. and Russia? What did it do between the U.S. and the Soviet Union? How were they with one another? All right, Miss Kalu.
So this is for like the first question and the second question. The Cuban Missile Crisis was when the Soviet Union and the United States got into an argument. The United States and Russia then did not trust each other. That's how the Russia and the United States started not to trust each other. This made the relationship of the United States and Russia worse. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a 13-day confrontation that started by an American bomb. The whole war started by nuclear weapons and atomic bombs that were getting ready to launch to Italy and Turkey, which caused the Cuban Missile Crisis. If this war went on, the world would have a big change in society.
Okay, and one more highlight for this point before we move on. What was that big change? If those bombs were launched, someone tell us what would have happened. If those bombs were launched, what would have happened? Let's get Mr. Jared Lithday in the back. What would happen if those bombs were launched?
What would happen, so if America, they had more stronger bombs, and so their bombs would have took out the Soviet Union, I think it was.
Well, let's think. What does the paragraph tell us? What would have happened if those bombs were launched? If someone launched one bomb, just one, what would that have created? Go ahead, Austin.
It'll create like a big explosion, like like one bomb they destroyed Pearl Harbor, and U.S. used a bomb to destroy Japan.
Okay, so that bomb that they used to destroy Japan caused a lot of damage, but we have it in the paragraph. If someone had shot, what would have ended up happening? What would have ended up happening? All right, Mr. Spencer.
A new war.
Hmm?
A new war.
Okay, we're not referring to the paragraph. It says it right in there. Let's go with Miss Kennett.
It would cause almost like a ripple effect. If one were to go off, others would too, to get back at them. And in the paragraph, it said that it could possibly start a war, or it could be the end of the world.
I love it. Yes. That's why the Cuban Missile Crisis was so dangerous. If one side shot a nuclear weapon, that would have caused a ripple effect where other countries, other allies, remember the U.S. was with NATO, and the Soviet Union had their allies in China and other communist countries. They all would have shot their weapons. That would have caused the end of the world. So now let's move on to paragraph 4, please.
A country decides to go to war for several reasons. In case of the Cold War, many countries went to war because their allies accepted a form of government, different than others, communism or democracy. Some countries go to war for imperialism to gain more land, while others go to war to protect their own interests. America can only go to war if Congress approves it, and a formal declaration of war is made.
All right, so question for paragraph 4. How and why does a country decide to go to war? Okay, Mr. Davis.
America can only go to war if Congress approves it and a formal declaration of war was made.
I like it. So that's the policy of America if America chooses to go to war. What about the case of the Cold War? What was happening in the Cold War? Why were people deciding to have these proxy wars because of this? Mr. Hagee.
Cold War wasn't actually a war, and it was never approved by Congress. But the Cold War was an arms race to see it's like chess. Who could get the checkmate faster? But in this case, when it was a double checkmate, they both could kill millions of innocent people in a press of a button.
Okay, all right. So that was one front. Graham is very right. The arms race started. So you had this race to get weapons. What was the other big? You had two things that made the Cold War. One was the arms race to get weapons. What was the other thing? Graham was right. It wasn't an actual war. It was also a war of what? And people were trying to decide what? Miss Steele.
It was a war of peace, wasn't it?
War of communism, capitalism.
Think of it. Mr. Bauer.
It was a war of political differences and
Okay.
leaders who despised each other.
Okay. Good. Political differences. Certain leaders wanted certain things. What were they fighting over? These political differences. Somebody wanted this, somebody wanted that. Miss Kalu.
It was a war of communism.
Communism. And all right, Mr. Andrews.
It was a war between government, democracy, and communism. The U.S. wanted the whole world to be have a form of government democracy, and the Soviet Union wanted to control the whole world as communism. Communism is where they just control everything, there's no vote, and democracy is where you vote for your leaders.
Oh boy, oh boy. I love it. I absolutely love it. All right, let's go on to the reading of paragraph 5, please.
The U.S. and USSR were thirsty to have other countries adopt their form of government. More countries with democratic government meant more power and influence for the Anglo-American world power. More countries with communism meant more power for the King of the North, the Soviet Union. This was the case for the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Some in each country wanted either communism or democracy, and this resulted in violent civil wars. The U.S. would support those who wanted democracy with weapons, training troops, and aid, while the USSR would support those who wanted communism with weapons, training troops, and aid. The U.S. became involved in these wars to spread democracy and gain power and influence the world.
All right, question for paragraph 5. Why did the U.S. become involved in the Vietnam and Korean wars? Okay, Mr. Petrick.
The U.S. wanted democracy for the whole world so that the world could not be fighting all the time, and they didn't, so that the world didn't get mad at dictators and telling them what to do. And so when Soviet Union went into Korea and the Vietnam Wars to make them communists, the U.S. wanted to help to defend those countries from Soviet Union so that they do not become communist, because they wanted them to be democratic or capitalist.
Okay, all right, I like that. Sometimes the U.S. or the USSR will get involved, but then there were people in those countries that wanted something as well. Okay, Ms. Krava.
Well, according to the text, it says certain countries that believed in democracy, the U.S. would supply them with weapons, soldiers to fight them.
Okay, all right. What about those countries that believed in communism? Ms. Kindis.
They became involved in the Korean and Vietnam Wars because they were concerned about the spread of communism. But the people who liked communism, they were trying to keep it going.
So the U.S. had to fight some people in those countries themselves. Because of time, we have to move on. I'm sorry. Let's have the reading of paragraph 6.
Democracy and communism are two forms of government created by mankind to rule themselves. While each form of government has its advantages, each government also has its disadvantages. They are both presented as solutions to mankind's problems. But when you think about it, what are mankind's real problems? Sickness, injustice, pain, and death are conditions we all face, and can a human government solve that? What do you think?
Okay, this is a pretty deep question for 5th grade. Paragraph 6. In your opinion, can any form of government answer the problems of mankind, and what do you think is the solution? Okay, this is opinion. Go ahead and tell me, Miss Carter.
Yes, because they both
president as a solution to mankind problems.
Okay. What do you think, Ms. Galoo?
In my opinion, I think that the government can't always answer all the problems in our life. According to the passage, it says that sickness, injustice, pain, and death are all conditions we have to face. The government cannot solve all the problems in your life. You have to face it and move on.
Okay, all right. Let's see, who else? This is a good one because this is opinion. Okay, let's get Mr. Harkin in the back.
I think yes, because with the click of a button, they can wipe out any country really with a nuke.
Okay, all right. So you think, hey, we can solve a problem, just get you up out of here. Okay, all right. Let's go, Miss Kennett.
No, I think no, because it says that with many advantages, there are also disadvantages. It's not safe for anyone to be democratic or a communist. These people can suffer from sickness, injustice, pain, or death. What they could do instead of this is that they can maybe talk to the government and see what they can do to make our country a better place.
Okay, all right. So maybe we just need to talk it out. Last person on this, Mr. Petrick.
In my opinion, no, there cannot be a form of government that treats everyone, because there's always going to be one. In dictatorship, there's always going to be one person who disagrees and wants to rebel, and in democracy, there's always going to be always people who disagree and does not like the way of government. So in my opinion, there's no government that can make everybody happy. We can only learn from our mistakes and choose the forms of government that don't suit anybody.
What a deep answer from a fifth grader. As much as I would like to stick to this question because it's very, very good, we do have to move on. All right, so for question 7, the A question, what does this picture represent? This is a picture of something that we have learned about. What does this picture represent? What is this a picture of? Okay, let's go with one I haven't heard from in a while. Mr. Bauer.
It is the Berlin Wall separating East Germany and West Germany. It is a picture of children attempting to climb the wall.
All right, so this is the Berlin Wall separating East Germany, East Berlin and West Berlin. So now here's the B part of the question. What are some facts about the picture pictured below? Patrick told us this is the Berlin Wall. What are some facts about the Berlin Wall that you came to learn? Okay, Mr. Andrews.
Well, it looks like a kid is trying to climb the wall, maybe hit a family member or a friend is on the other side.
Okay, all right. We do know that this wall separated friends and family members. Miss Krava.
People who are stuck behind the Berlin Wall and wanted to be free. The Soviet Union didn't want the spread of democracy to be spread in their country, so they built a wall to keep out democratic people.
Okay, the reasoning behind the wall. I like that. Miss Steele.
And one of my facts that I learned in social studies, they broke down the wall.
That wall did eventually come down. Okay, a little spoiler alert for what we're going to be learning about a little bit later. Mr. Hagee.
The wall tried to keep in all the well-educated people so they could keep their economy steady and not collapse. It was the economy based off of nothing other than those. So when they left, everything left with them.
That is a great, great point. That was another big reason why they built that wall, because they did not want the intellectual people to leave and go to democratic countries. Okay, to end our school off, our saigo no commento. Okay, Mr. Petrick, end it all for us.
Germany really wanted this wall to work because first they spent all this money building a wall separating the entire Berlin east to west, and every time someone figured out a new way to escape, to like maybe a ladder or digging holes, they would patch that and spend even more money trying to make sure that nobody gets from east to west or from west to east.
All right. I would like to thank you all for another great public speaking school. I know we went a little far on that Watch History article, but question 6 on there, I was very interested to see your responses. If you have any comments that you would like to share, you can share them after the meeting is done because we have run out of time. I want to thank everyone who had parts today, and I want to thank all of you for your great participation during the Watch History article. And, okay, our parent in the back would like to make a comment as well.
Very briefly, Mr. Eccles, I just want to thank you for allowing me to come here and see this wonderful demonstration for all these very gifted students. Mara, Sydney, Gata, and Ellis who did a wonderful job. I teach this in college. We're doing the Cuban Missile classes in a 2000 level Cuban Missile Crisis in a 2000 level college class. And my students don't present it as well as I saw it here today. With the professionalism, the poise, the confidence that's expressed not only by the presenters who were students, but by the students who were responding to questions. They were thorough answers, comprehensive, holistic, and showed incredible critical thinking skills way beyond the level of 5th grade. So I want to commend you as their teacher, but I want to commend them as the students for doing a wonderful job. They have no idea how far advanced they are based on what I'm seeing in college. Wonderful job. I applaud you all.
Big round of applause for everybody. Now, after such a great public speaking school, as usual, I really have to make sure that I get this right and I have this loaded up.